It's time to talk music, audio gear, and anything else that crosses our minds. I'm Mark.
And I'm Peter.
And welcome to the Hurton Audio Podcast.
So, this week we got Reason 13.
Woo! We've been waiting for this for quite a while.
I think it's because a lot of the DAWs are digital audio workstations, if you're not producer way inclined, although I think everybody is now because the information's just so available. Reason's been on Reason 12 since it must be something to the tune of 2020 or 2021. So it's been quite a long wait really to get Reason 13, which I think is good. I think a yearly point upgrade is not a necessity for a lot of these DAWs anymore. I think I would say a point upgrade, I mean the full going from 12 to 13, because I think now they sort of intersperse a lot of 0.5s and 0.2s and all these little updates, which I think really makes a lot more sense for the consumer. But I imagine for the dev team it makes a lot more sense not to have to be I always think back to games like Guitar Hero or say Call of Duty, where there is one coming out every year, especially in the 2000s.
I think you'll find a lot of the time that when they feel like they're on a golden run or they've got a lot to say, they'll put stuff out year on year, and then once they're very happy, or if they've really had a lot of success in 3 iterations, they might go, right, well, we've done everything we wanted to do and everything we can think to do. What do we add? Because I think the thing that makes the DAW upgrade so difficult is trying to have enough content to sell people. You've got to remember, a lot of people, if we're talking about Cubase or Pro Tools or even to an extent Logic, those are DAWs that a lot of people don't really use the in-house plugins for. Right, this is where Ableton and Reason differ from the 3 DAWs I just mentioned.
Yeah.
Ableton and Reason seem to be a lot more driven by the factory sound banks and the instruments you are given with those products. I would
say FL Studio also seems to be in that ballpark.
Yeah, whereas Pro Tools, Cubase, Logic for the most part, from what I've seen people use, I don't use Logic personally. They seem to be a lot more about, this is the sequencer workstation where you can manage your audio and record things. But this is where you're going to use all your third-party stuff. Even if the actual, Steinberg and Avid, they don't advertise it that way. That's not what they necessarily want people to do with it. But that is what people do with it for the most part. I mean, Cubase has great instruments like the Prologue and the Retrologue and stuff. They are cool instruments, but I do like the Pad Shop. But when you've got a wealth, I suppose this all depends as well into your workflow and how many plugins you own personally.
I think personally, and this is just a overall sort of vibe of what I get from what you see people do. Most people who are rocking Complete or a UAD suite or all waves will be in a DAW that not only hosts plugins and you've got to remember DAWs like Reason, didn't host plugins till Reason 12. Now it does a great job at hosting plugins, but again, I think it's just one of those where, because it didn't for such a long time, it's still on Plugin Boutique, doesn't say Reason hosts plugins sometimes.
Yeah.
Doesn't say compatibility Reason, which I'm surprised about, but also, so if you're going back to say something like Complete, it'll have been the DAW of choice for Complete to use one of these more professional, almost they're virtual tape decks almost. I know every DAW is, but they really are the way they look. You can use Pro Tools, Cubase, and probably Logic, because I say, I'm thinking about Logic, but we don't use Logic super often. Just like tape machines essentially. And you don't even have to really see any of their built-in stuff because it's all hidden in drop-down lists. Whereas I feel with Reason, the rack's just there waiting, asking to have stuff loaded into it.
Even if you put a VST that's a third party, and you still get a little VST third party box that you can then turn around and route with all the wires and connections.
Yeah. And it's the same with Ableton. Ableton sort of has all their, I think it's called the rack, whatever the bottom tab is, pop-up tab for Ableton whenever you load an instrument or effect. That's sort of asking you really to drag stuff in, and whereas, you know, Cubase and Pro Tools and Logic, I think to the same extent, operate more like a traditional mixer, because you don't load the plugins into the mixing desk on Reason. You know, you load them into the rack. It's sort of the same really on Ableton. So I suppose that's the main difference that I would think, and that's probably why that mentality is there. But you know, it's just a weird musing more than anything else. That you know, I do agree that Reason and Ableton, people are a lot happier to use the built-in sounds, you know, and Reason in particular, the main compliment is the factory library.
Yeah, and the synths, even like the Propeller, well, what was Propeller, now Reason Studio, like expanded synths that you got via rack extensions were all phenomenal. Like the way Reason seemed to approach like synthesis and VST design and stuff is really interesting, because, and this is why people rewire Reason into other DAWs for the sound sets.
Or now the VST rack plugin in Reason has sort of replaced that feature, because that feature I think was quite archaic when compared to like modern production, because this was a feature that was being used over 10 years ago, was the rewire.
And it never seemed to work very well a lot of the time when we tried it.
I think it worked, but you would really want to be bouncing everything as audio once you was happy with your session, because I'd done it a couple of times and then it starts to get a bit difficult if all your returns and stuff aren't loading in right. So I think it's one of those where once you get your idea in, you know, start bouncing it down individually into stems.
One of the best things at the moment, when they seem to announce a new numbered updates for a lot of the DAWs, is they seem to give you like a plugin pack with it. It's almost like DLC for a game now. It's like, right, well, you know, we can't just update like the actual thing, we have to give you some stuff, you know, to sort of say, you know, buy it.
I can't remember which version it was, but one of the versions it wasn't so much, they didn't so much get dragged for not having many rack extensions, but one of the versions, and I can't remember if it was 10, 11 or 12, they'd done a lot of under the hood stuff. And I think a lot of people were saying, you know, where's our new shiny thing? Where's the new shiny thing that we can all be excited about? On this version, them two main shiny things are Polytone, which is like a subtractive synthesizer, which is absolutely fantastic. I mean, I must have spent like a long time, you know, just playing around with it this week. Most of the week probably I've spent playing around with it. I really, really like it. And then Ripley, which is like a space echo sort of thing. But that's really, really nice as well. And again, we were saying about the upgrade price, it looks steep at $199, but again, when you think about buying plugins like that new, I mean, even if you got them on sale on something like Plugin Boutique, they'd still be $49 a pop each, and then that doesn't include all the DAW and the tools and the workflow stuff you would get. So it is sort of justified. I think it's also like our brains want to remember, like when we like upgraded years and years and years ago. Even if you upgraded from 11 to 12, that will have been like 4 or 5 years ago now. And money is different.
Yeah, things are more expensive in general, so I'm not surprised that some of the upgrades are a little bit more pricey, because it does make sense when you think about a lot of stuff. It's not like everything else is cheap and that's expensive. It's just that everything is just a little bit more expensive, it feels. If you've been like keeping an eye on, say, that guitar in a guitar shop, I'm sure you've seen it go up like by £200 or £300 over the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, as you're putting your pounds away, it's just slowly going up. Is the price of the guitar?
There's a few guitars that we was fortunate to buy a few years ago, where I've gone on a site like Gears for Music, and every time I look at it, it's a little bit more expensive, and you're like, that's not how like guitars work. And you're like, well, it just every time it just keeps getting a little bit more expensive, and you're like, well, I suppose that's just the way it is. But like I say, it does work like that with software. But I think people have got very used with software because of Waves slashing down prices, and then Plugin Boutique as well. People are like, I want it for 20 quid.
Yeah, well, the thing is with Plugin Boutique, and I really love Plugin Boutique, because you go on it and they're like, get £1,600 worth of Universal Audio plugins for $29, and you're like, what?
It almost feels like pirating to a certain extent because it's so cheap. You're like, surely nobody's making any money off this. But
it just doesn't, like, according to the retail prices on the Universal Audio plugins, there should be like $299 or $399 a plugin for like a compressor pack or a echo. And then, it's like, this is the problem that there was having with Reason, because, there was a small minority of people who was, umming and ahhing about the price. But there you go. If you actually, like, write down what you get with Reason, because the browser as well on Reason 13 is really no joke. And it's, if you use Reason, like I've been using Reason since technically version 5, but I didn't buy it till version 7, because the version 5 was, like, at college. We was using that. So I've been familiar with Reason for a really long time. So when they've changed the way the browser window works, it's like trying to learn a bike where the pedals spin a different way. Because for me, I'm so used to doing it the other way.
It's a little bit like how I've just updated my laptop from Windows 10 to Windows 11, and now everything's in a slightly different place. But it all looks similar, but it's just ever so slightly. It's like looking for your keys that you hang up in the same place, and then it's not there.
Yeah, and you know that it's going to be better when you actually get going. Like the browser looks like it's going to work really well, and it does work well from what I've seen, but it's just one of those things where you have these built-in practices that you do, and you just can't help but think, I've done that like this the entire time, and now I've got to do something different.
Yeah, it's very, very weird to get into that, but it does happen. Then you get used to it after a few weeks or so, but that transition point can be very difficult, and also it's just muscle memory. Like you say, it's like riding a bike, and like you've got a brand new shiny bike and the pedals are slightly forward and your legs are going, no, I don't want to be over there. And that's what it's like with all the production stuff. And I do think a lot of people get into like a nice little place where they go, I like where I am and I don't want to change stuff. It's like when you see studios freezing setups and stuff to say, well, we're happy with how this works and operates, so we don't really want to change it. We want to just keep it how it is. We like all the stuff we have.
Yeah.
And that's great if that's the way you like to use it. Like, say, if you're using your DAW as a tape machine, it's very valid because you're not going to change your tape machine every time a company goes, wow, we've got a tape machine with another feature.
There was a very notable example, and I cannot remember who the artist was.
Tom Petty?
No, but that yes, that's a notable example of freezing your studio.
Oh, right, sorry.
Yeah, because they was on Pro Tools 7, wasn't they? And they just never changed it, which worked really, really well for them. But an example that I read in a Computer Music or Future Music of an artist who had a really, really slow computer. Like, they didn't have any like RAM or whatever you need to run the new plugins. They didn't have like that draw speed essentially. And they said their workaround was that they used loads of vintage keyboards and MIDI, so they didn't need the processing power because all of their music was done in audio. They made like dance music or electronic, some sort of electronic or IDM thing. And there was like, yeah, so I can run like Pro Tools 8 or whatever on like a really, really old PC, and it doesn't even like have a buffer or stutter thing because, you know, I'm rocking all audio and, you know, I mean, almost any DAW and really most computers to a certain degree, unless you're starting to get on the tiny, tiny browsing laptops, can play like a 48-track session of audio.
Yeah, it was processing heavy, but I think because a lot of computers are trying to handle like 4K, some are trying to do 8K, aren't they? But less as but a lot of people are trying to develop stuff that works with like gaming and VR and all this stuff. Even if you're not looking at stuff like gaming, there's still stuff, technology akin to Apple Vision and stuff where they need a lot of actual RAM to run stuff, and even just like computer programs and everything, they just use high quality stuff.
And the other thing is, I think that if you was like PC manufacturing, almost every like kid and then basically anybody else, but I would say almost every kid would want to use either an audio editor, a video editor, or something like Blender, like 3D design editor.
Yeah, anybody.
And
Yeah.
if your product doesn't do that, they're going to go elsewhere, because that, most kids probably are very interested in being either some form of a content creator, be that music, video, 3D, vlogging. But I mean, even like if you think about you need a good video editor if you want to edit like a meme reel, really.
Yeah, and I think you could use apps off your phone. You can, to an extent, but I think a lot of people, we're old school, we like desktop stuff. So we're thinking from a place where you're gonna try to use professional software.
Even if you take that logic, say you've got an Apple iPhone or whatever brand equivalent it would be, but I'm going to list the Apple iPhone because they're traditionally good for media stuff. Say you can make a really, really good video edit or fan edit on your phone, and you go to a shop looking at PCs. If the PCs can't do something as good as your phone, well, you're not going to buy a PC. So I'm sort of saying...
That is fair, to be honest.
That's why I feel like the computer... I mean, I know technology doubles whatever it is every 3 years or something, like the speed and power.
The processing, the hardware, yeah.
Something to the tune of that. But I just think that really if you are, spec-wise, they have to do this stuff that caters for it. Because everybody wants to do... This is why people are going out and buying computers, I mean, we've got at the time, it was like a pretty high-spec gaming PC, and we don't really use it for gaming. We just use it for audio production, because you have to have the power. And, a lot of the time our PC, which unfortunately I think is starting to be on its last legs, especially because it doesn't go to Windows 11.
Yeah.
Because of the motherboard. So that's going to be a conversation we're going to have later down the line. Especially since we're rocking the new stuff like Reason 13. I was seeing in Reason 13 it recommends Windows 11, and I was like, oh.
The thing is with our computers, say you've got... I'm going to use a really good example that we can trust this on. We've got a plugin by Waves called the Butch Vig. I think it's vocals.
Yeah, Butch Vig vocals, yeah.
Butch Vig vocals. And that is like a plugin that we use as a barometer for how much CPU the computer has. At one point, when we first got it, you could put 1 on and it would struggle a little bit. And then we upgraded the PC a little bit.
Yeah.
And then it's now we can have maybe 5 or 6. And as soon as you start to put that 5th or 6th one on, the session is very much struggling.
I think what we did is the Butch Vig vocals plugin, because we've always been quite big on the Wave stuff from the giveaways and everything. The Butch Vig vocals plugin was the plugin that really started to push us to upgrade the full PC. So I believe that was on the previous PC, and that was when we rebuilt. I think we rebuilt from scratch our PC, and that's when the Butch Vig vocals plugin we could throw loads on, and obviously that goes without saying that it could be any set of plugins, but obviously I imagine it doesn't matter what PC you're on, to a certain extent, if you start throwing some of the chunkiest plugins you've got on, and you make them 5 of them on every channel, on as many audio channels as you can think, it will stop at some point.
And that is something that, it's shocking how fast you run out of tracks. I mean, they're always like, we made DAWs so people could have 300 tracks, and people only have 10 tracks. In the 70s, we used 48 or 96 tracks, but the problem is all the hardware is in of itself, it all is electronics, it all works. It doesn't need the desk CPU. The problem with computer, making music, is every single thing is tied to your processor. So if you're trying to do a mix, or you're even using software instruments, say Complete, using the Melodyne, not Melodyne, sorry, the Mellotron sort of thing on UVI. I can't remember which suite.
Sorry,
it is
yes,
now.
the UVI Mello. Yeah, that's the one you're talking about. Yeah.
Say you're using all these vintage emulations. You can only get to about 30 or 40 before your PC, or our PC, should I say, is starting to really, really struggle.
I mean, I would say that if we're using stuff like UVI, and this is where Reason and Ableton have their advantages. If you're using stock stuff, you can throw way more on. As soon as you start using third party, and this is why I think we were citing the Butch Vig vocals, if you're using some fairly demanding third party stuff, and UVI definitely does that for our PC, I don't know if it does it for everybody's PCs, but UVI literally takes down what we've got, Alan Heath mixing desk. If we use that for an audio, oh no, it wasn't that. It was one of them. No, yeah, it was that. It takes down that mixing desk.
Yeah,
if we throw UVIs on.
It crackles the USB interface.
It just like glitches it essentially. I don't know why, don't know how that works, but I do believe that Alan Heath Desk's its USB audio card, it never got an update, and it did have one or two bugs, I'm assuming, because I did do some looking into. Works okay, but whereas it runs a lot better on the Focusrite stuff, does the UVI suites.
So I'm going to go back to Reason 13 for a second.
Yeah.
There's a big thing that they've done on the last few iterations of Reason 13, but also on almost every like update, like you see, like Cubase, everybody talks about the same thing. There's one word that is always mentioned, and that is workflow.
Yes.
It's like the biggest thing is that people are fed up of clunky programs that are hard to operate, where things don't do things easily, and that's the biggest thing in all these updates. Like, say if you're on, say you froze your setup and you've been on Reason 7 for like the last 8 or 9 years.
Yeah.
That's the biggest difference. And now they've got tagging, they've got intelligent browsers, which are like, you was getting a bit of like sticky patches going on, weren't you, when you was using it?
I think what was happening for me is it was trying to, because I was doing patch design, so it's sort of built for scrolling and making music and saying, look, I just want to scroll through all my patches and pick a patch and play with it. Whereas I was like going through a full library of patches I was making and trying to change a patch of one of the things inside a combinator. And that was, I wouldn't say it was confusing the browser, but the browser definitely at points was not sure. It was latching to the combinator, and I was trying to change the Polytone patch. And I don't think that's so much a bug as it is maybe for me a user error of not paying as much attention. Or maybe I think you have to cancel the browser window if you load in the combinator to then reload the browser from the Polytone.
It's a bit like if you ever use Machine and you're on browse mode, the pad that's furthest down and left will always be the browsing patch. So if you go back to playing your drum kit, you'll hit the kick drum and it'll be like a bass or polysynth that's still on the browse tab, and then you've got to just cancel the browse tab and it goes back to your kick drum.
So you just have to make like a workflow adjustment of being like, right, that's my sound, close down the browser. And this is what they were saying on the live stream essentially, because the browser pops up in each individual window. So we're using 3 screens. So I separate the rack, the mixer, and the sequencer. So if you're using the browser, it locks to each of the 3 windows. So what you need to do is you need to shut the browser when you're done with it on the sequencer, so you can reopen the browser on the rack window, essentially, that sort of thing. Because then it will latch to the correct window. And in all fairness to Reason, I know some people are like, why can't it float around the entire like multi-monitor setup? It's like, well, the old version of it would open up via the tab inside the screen. So the old version couldn't, the new version is like a pop-up window that moves around. The old version couldn't even move out the left-hand side of the screen. You couldn't move it to the right or to the bottom or anything. So I don't see why that was a complaint, because that is not a feature that Reason had. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I suppose Reason, do you think Reason's doing a good job of keeping its original personality as it updates around?
I think, considering this is the struggle for, I think, for Reason and Ableton, but Ableton, I think it's a lot easier because it's stereotypically seen as the most popular DAW for like home producers. So Ableton isn't thinking, right, well, we need to change something. They're thinking we need to leave it how it is and just bring features. Whereas Reason is very quirky looking. And I think because it has the hardware aesthetic that was originally, I would have thought, the catch for most people. People will have gone, well, or should I say the hook, to say, well, I use a real 1176 or whatever, and these plugins all look like the real stuff. So that will be easier for my brain. And also, if you were used to cabling everything in the back and you was doing weirder modular stuff, Reason, you flip it round. You can cable everything in the back to your own like creativity, and that's where Reason really, really shines, because it does operate like hardware. Whereas I suppose every year, less people are, stereotypically coming up from that background of using hardware and using cables. So really, I'm surprised they've kept that format. But again, Reason, one of Reason's best features is backwards compatibility. I mean, you can open a Reason 3 session in Reason 13 and it will play perfectly and not not miss a beat. You know, if you're all your audio folders there, that you know your session management's good. But if you're using just stock, that Reason 1 session will play in Reason 13, no problem. Whereas I will say on Cubase, we've had sessions where they've taken a plugin out, like Spectre or something.
Yeah, or there's different point updates or compatibility issues and different things. Like you say, there's things that aren't there.
Yeah, so Reason is really, really good at backwards compatibility. And so I would have thought, really, unless they can create a alt version of the rack isn't ever going to leave Reason. I mean, I don't know why they would, because that is what makes Reason stand out.
It's the USP of the full DAW, isn't it? And I was going to say, the thing that I was going to say as well with Reason is that Reason has been playing catch-up to the other DAWs. So obviously, what was it? Reason 12, they added plugins. Reason, was it 9? They added audio.
Reason 7, they added audio.
Audio, yeah. Audio recording specifically.
Maybe it was 6. 5 didn't have audio.
Yeah.
Because we used 5 at college. It might have been that Reason Record came out, or Propellerhead Record came out around 6, or during 6, so it was all implemented in 7, or it was implemented in 6, but I can't remember how that worked.
Yeah.
Maybe it was that, and this is just, you could Google it if you wanted it easy, but I think, let's just say 5 had no audio, 6 had that, and Record, which came out as a separate DAW, come out, so you could then latch them together, and then I think in 7 they merged them.
Yeah, because the latching different programs together is very hard, and it's a tough sell, and a lot of people just won't do it. So I think that's why they end up having it as an all-in-one. But that's why I say the Reason has been playing catch-up for a while, because they've slowly been getting the features that people are desperately asking them for. And it's like with the VSTs, yes, that's not Reason's bag, but they'll get a lot more people using it if they can use VSTs. And if you have a master chain that you use and then you call Reason, it's like you can't use your master chain. It's very frustrating. I think that's what a lot of people was having issues with. It's like, I want to use a fab filter to EQ. I don't have that. I don't have a tool like that in Reason.
It becomes something where you have to stem out everything in Reason to mix in Pro Tools, which is a practice you see a lot of people do who rock Ableton. I feel like a lot of people who are on Ableton, and I'm talking, this is like the pros, people like Madian come to mind. Don't know if he does this specifically, but a lot of people will mix, especially if you read like Future Music and Sound on Sound, you'll see them making dance music in Pro Tools, and they either build like a seed or build the main session in Ableton or whatever.
FL Studio, I think some of them still use, like Madian and Porter Robinson was big advocates of FL Studio.
Yeah.
Whether they use it now or not is...
I reckon they use it for elements of songs and then they bounce it all out, so they may use something like a Pro Tools or whatever as their mix DAW, because, you know, it gets to a point for a lot of them where they end up all in audio anyway. There's a reason why that's a really common practice.
I think as well, it's so if you're getting a third-party mixer in, there's no problems. Like there's nothing like sending a session to somebody. And this is partly why the cloud stuff that was really trying to get popular a few years back has really backfired, because I think for a lot of people, it's like, yeah, let's hop on a session together. And it's like, well, do you have Isotope? And somebody's like, no. And it's like, well, now we can't use that. And do you have Waves? Oh, I use UAD. Oh, so we can't use any plugins that are the same.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And then that makes it very difficult. And if you're using soft synths to collab, say, via the inbuilt Zoom style collab thing, I just thought, I understand, and then latency and everything.
Yeah.
It just never, we haven't really heard any of the DAWs talking about that after they both had a try. I think Pro Tools and Cubase had a good try of it.
I think Cubase did a bit of an update to theirs recently. I think in Cubase
the
13.
Cloud recording, they called it, I think.
But it's one of those, I suppose you either use it every day or you never use it. It's one of those features, like a lot of the features. It depends, I suppose, if you've actually got, I mean, I suppose if you're a bunch of producers who are like paid every day to make music and you're all rocking Cubase and you're all rocking Cloud Connect and it works for you, then that's great. But I know what you mean, Mark. You don't hear like a lot of people be like, yeah, so we hopped on Cubase Cloud Connect or whatever it is, and
you just don't hear people talking about it. I don't even hear like Steinberg or Pro Tools had a version of it, didn't they? I'm sure. You don't hear them talk about it in the updates and stuff very much now.
A lot of people talk about remote sessions, but under the assumption that somebody bounces them a WAV.
Well, the
they
thing
load
is
the
now,
WAV in and
because now Zoom and stuff's so popular, now you just have your audio driver and your screen record, and then somebody else is like watching you and saying, do this, do that, and that's where it's gone, I think.
yeah.
But yeah, any other things that people should know about Reason 13 if they've not tried it out or heard of it, Peter?
I would say it's got a very, very much improved sequencer from previous versions of Reason, which is, it's nice because Reason 12 was so focused that the main consensus I've seen online is that Reason 12 was like, use the plugin in your favorite DAW, and everybody was like, what if Reason's my favorite DAW? And it was like, then we got nothing.
Oh yeah, because they didn't have anything to like give you.
Essentially, I think that maybe it was the last version because Mimic was there, but obviously Mimic's just a sampler, and a sampler for some people isn't the same. It's not as glamorous, although I have really got my money's worth out of Mimic. Whereas on this version, it's less about getting out of Reason and more about staying in Reason. So I'd say if you like Reason as a DAW, this is the one to upgrade for.
Yeah, right. And on that note, we'll end the podcast there. Thanks for listening, everybody. What DAWs do you use? Let us know in the polls. Comment on Instagram and do all that stuff. But I know the DAWs is always a funny subject on memes and stuff, on the band memes. But yeah, we rock Cubase, we rock Pro Tools a little bit, we rock Ableton a little bit, and we mainly use Cubase and Reason. So yeah, let us know what you use in the polls below. And thanks for listening, everybody.